We're going to call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission, committee meeting day. It's February 14th, 2013. My name's William Brown, and I'm chairman of the commission. We're passing a tablet around the room. If you would, please sign your name if you're in attendance. If you're here to represent a specific group, put the name of the group down that you're representing. If you wish to address the commission, do so at the time the subject matter about which you're here is being discussed in that committee. For example, if it's about wildlife, wait until the wildlife committee is having their discussion, or fisheries, etc., whatever area that you want to address. Come to the front of the room, to the microphone, state your name and your purpose in addressing the commission. And if there's several people here for a specific purpose, would ask that you have one or two people address the issues that you want to address rather than everyone speak. And I reserve the right to limit the amount of time that you spend addressing the commission. At this time, we will proceed to Wildlife. Commissioner Teague. Well, wait, I'm sorry. Miss Barber, will you call the roll, please?
Jim Bledsoe. Here. William Brown.
Here.
Harold Cannon. Bill Cox.
Here.
Jeff Griggs.
Here.
Jeff McMillan.
Here.
Tom Rice. Jim Ripley.
Here.
Julie Schuster.
Here.
Clayton Stout. James Stroud.
Here.
Trey Teague.
Here.
Jamie Woodson.
All right, thank you. All right, at this time, we'll proceed to the Wildlife Committee and Commissioner Teague.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. I'm Trey Teague, Chair of the Wildlife Management Committee. I'd like to recognize Gray Anderson to give us an update on spring turkeys and talk about the National Wild Turkey Federation Convention.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let's see. All right, where are we, Jason? All right, fantastic. Okay, for those who don't know, we've got 40,000 sportsmen and women converging on the state of Tennessee this week for the National NWTF Convention. And as take an opportunity to brag a little bit about what we've got going on in the state of Tennessee with our turkeys, I appreciate a few minutes to discuss what's been going on. Chris Hunter, our turkey coordinator for the state, is already at the meeting. The two-day technical sessions that are going on associated with that, with all the, there'd be 35 or 40 of the biologists from across the United States will be coming in to discuss that, and Chris is deep in those meetings, so I'm filling in for him today to give you guys a little update on what's going on. Pretty much looking a little bit of an outlook to what's going on with our 2013 season. And one of the things I wanted to do, and it plays off a conversation I had with Commissioner McMillan several years ago, that talk about some of the deeper information that we have out there that we don't typically share in a season setting, mainly because our turkeys are doing so well, typically across the state, that we don't want to really wear you out with a lot of the finer details of that. But I have taken advantage today to spend a few minutes to do that. I think most people know what we're talking about here. 30,000 turkeys on average right now. Our population seems to be doing extraordinarily well. That extrapolates up using some rough estimates from some work done in the West Virginia area. Our annual population in standing turkey is somewhere around 300,000 any given year right now. So we believe we have an extraordinarily stable population right now. Most of our harvest, as everybody knows, occurs in the spring. And most of those birds are taken on private lands. And so we do have quite a bit on public lands, but most of our birds are private lands. And we are very gobbler-centric, especially in the spring. And so, and then just looking at what we've got going here, and there's two things going on in this slide. The blue is total harvest, which we see as you roll along. In the early years, we had typically one bird on public land and one bird on private land, and so the harvest at that point was fairly low. There weren't a whole lot of birds being taken at that point. And then all of a sudden we start to see, in this era, we start to see 2 birds taken on public land or on private land. And then in 1990 or 2006, we allowed all 4 of those birds to be taken on private land. So you start to see this enormous growth as we've moved off of our WMAs and put the emphasis back on the private lands for what's going on. The second number, the lower number line there, is those successful hunters. And what we see with our successful hunters, and these are the people that are checking those birds in, is we're staying pretty stable, the number of successful hunters, just over 20,000 successful hunters in any given year, harvesting 36,000 birds, you know, in a good year. The thing to remember on that, and this is one thing we kind of get lost in, is how many unsuccessful hunters are out there. And our estimates of total number of hunters out there, turkey hunters, is somewhere over 100,000, between 100 and 120,000. So most of our turkey hunters in the state of Tennessee are not successful in any given year. And so it's not an unimportant. That's me. And so, I know. Let's do an honest survey and we'll figure those numbers out exactly. But looking at, and this is some of the numbers we've really been hammering on for the last couple of years about the extra bird per day. But we look at how these successful hunters harvest these birds. And for the longest time, if you look at those up until 1999 when the regulations changed to really expand to those county birds, getting them out of the WMAs, we were holding about 1.25 bird per successful hunter. So the average hunter was taking pretty much 1 bird, and then the occasional was taking an extra. Now we're up into the 1.6 birds per hunter. And what we see on some of the data that's coming out of Fort Campbell, where they're allowed 2 birds, is they're up at around the 1.9 bird. So it's a pretty significant jump in the number, you know, how you do that third of a bird per successful hunter makes a little bit of a difference. We don't know the total impact of that if it went into the state of Tennessee, but a third of a bird multiplied out by 20,000 hunters is a relatively significant number and worth considering as we move forward in our management. And these are the numbers that really give me comfort. And this is the Jake to adult. This is what's going on in our spring harvest, what our harvest age structure looks like. And a lot of this, all of this, especially in the new numbers or the recent years as we're closing in on 90% of our harvest is adult birds, so 2-year-old birds, longbeards, whatever you want to call them. That's telling we have a huge amount of selectivity. Our hunters are choosing not to shoot those jakes. And so you look back in those restoration years, 65% mature birds, they're pretty much shooting whatever walked in front of them. And we'll see with our 1-bird hunters, the people that are successful with only 1 bird, they shoot at a very similar rate at that 6.65. So it's pretty much opportunistic for a lot of our hunters. But now we're seeing as we move through the years, we've got a lot of birds out there. We've got a lot of educated bird hunters out there. They're choosing to go after that more mature bird. So that tells us, again, great comfort that most of the state of Tennessee is in a good place with our turkeys as a population and as a harvest. Here's where it starts to how we deal with who's doing the harvesting. And so, again, you can start to see those numbers kind of moving around as the bag limits change. But you start to see that 75% of our successful hunters take a single bird. It's a very low number of our total hunters. It's typically anywhere between 600 and 800 of our total 120,000 or so hunters. It's only, 1% of those hunters take all 4 birds in any given year. It's a very important 4 because they take 4 birds. So we'll see in a second it's quite a bit. But most of our hunters are unsuccessful. Our second most important group of hunters in the state of Tennessee for turkeys take a single bird, 1 and done. But you look at the percentage in the bag, and this is where it becomes important. You multiply those up by 4, you're starting to see 15-20% of our total harvest is by that very small percentage of people. So they're an important person, an important sportsman, for that consideration. So that our total harvest is starting to really trail down. Less than 50% of our total kill is actually by those 1-bird hunters. And then this comes out of a survey we did several years ago. The data is a little bit old, but it's looking at across the bottom. You'll see 0 to 4, which is either 0 didn't harvest a bird, 4 you filled your entire season bag, and this is how many days of field did they hunt. And this is for the total season. And we see our unsuccessful hunters still hunted about 8 days a week, or 8 days during the 42-day season. You get up into the 3- and 4-bird hunters, and they're spending almost twice that amount of time in the woods, spending about 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks, pursuing turkeys in the spring season. The interesting thing is it didn't matter if you're unsuccessful or you're most successful. When you went out to hunt, you pretty much hunted for a half a day. So the average hunter out there goes after a bird, does a 4-hour hunt. I mean, there's some, we got there 14 hours of hunting and all this kind of stuff. But on average, no matter what you were doing, everybody kind of hunted the same way. The kicker is how good at it you are. And there's some degree of habitat, because they also saw fewer birds. The 0 hunters and the 1 hunters saw fewer birds, so they're probably hunting in less optimal spots. The 4 bird guys are probably doing more scouting, probably just better at it. But you see harvest per hour. Obviously, if you didn't harvest, you didn't get anything. But the 1, 2s, and 3s, you start getting up there around that, you know, almost 30%. So it only takes 3 hours for a really good hunter to harvest 1 bird. The other part of that is, interestingly enough, and I couldn't find these numbers when I was trying to pull this together, that number looks very similar for the gobbler ratio. And again, I mentioned it a minute ago, but our 1 bird hunters are down, they're just shooting whatever walks in front of them. They're just happy to have a turkey in front of them. It's the 4 bird guys, those guys are over 90%. They're extraordinarily selective in what they actually harvest. So we see not only a success rate, but also a little bit of a interest in what they shoot. And so it tells us we have a couple different kind of hunters going out there, which makes sense. So in general, what we've seen over the last 8 years or so is our hunter numbers are relatively constant at this point, just over 20,000. Our hunter activity, you know, the hunters are enjoying it out there. Everything is doing just fine. Everything we can tell, our turkey populations seem to be doing just fine. There are some concerns here and there. We've got the UGA study that we've talked about before. I've got a guy that's doing an Illinois study he's doing a master's work, and he's crunching some of our data for us as well, just to kind of keep an eye on what's going on out there. But that's just some little portions of the state. And so, but the rest of the state, I think everything looks great. And then, as I have in all bold down here, most importantly, our hunters are extraordinarily satisfied. And so for the last decade, our satisfaction rate has been greater than 90%. It's up in the 92, 94% in most years, if I'm correct on that. And our hunters just are really happy with what's going on out there. And so I think everything from that perspective is a very, very positive thing. And then my last thing, I'll be happy to answer any questions, but then I guess the reason I'm here, other than to do a little bragging about what we have done, what's going on with the turkeys in Tennessee, is to make sure everybody knows about the convention. It's at the Opryland. It is an incredible meeting. And so when I was turkey coordinator for those 5 or 6 years, it's amazing to see the enthusiasm of the people that show up out there. And it gets a little loud with all of the calls, but I guess that's just showing their enthusiasm. Seminars, auctions, lectures, banquets, entertainment, there's all sorts of stuff going on. So I encourage anybody that gets the opportunity to go out there and see it. I believe the commission you guys have worked on, your registration packets are going to be at the registration booth. So those of you that selected just need to show up at registration, and you should be taken care of. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about either the convention or the brief history and a little bit of bragging we've done on the turkey population.
The 90% survey, when was that survey taken? And I mean, can you give me any more details as far as how that,
Which survey?
the 90% hunter status?
Oh, the hunters, that's our UT survey. That's what we do with the University of Tennessee. And so where we do we used to do it every year, and now we do it every other year. And so they do a phone survey, a random digit dial. So they're just calling people across the state of Tennessee. And if they're hunters, they find out what they hunt, and if they're happy with what they hunt. So it's a UT survey that's been conducted for quite some time.
And the second one, the 95% private land, is that concerning to you a little bit? I mean, are we taking it away from the blue collar folks out here that might not have those opportunities to
No.
experience that hunt?
Well, and when I first started running those numbers years ago, because the first time I really started looking at WMA versus private land was when I was looking at some youth hunt opportunities, and I was extraordinarily surprised at how many turkeys are taken during those youth hunts. But no matter no matter how you look at those numbers, from the percentage of public lands to private lands that are available across the state, it's almost perfectly matched up. And so, as far as we're 93% of the state, somewhere in there is private land. So the fact that those ratios match up, it seems to work out just fine. And it goes through for our adult harvest, our youth harvest, all of those numbers. The WMAs appear to offer opportunity in relation to the land base, if that makes any sense.
we can talk later, but I didn't do very well in math, so I'm still trying to figure out how that number evens out when you still say 95% of the birds taken. Is that, did I read that slide
Right,
correctly?
right. Oh, yeah, most of our birds are private land birds. And, I think a lot of that goes back to those, especially when you get into the how successful those 2, 3, and 4 bird hunters, the most avid of the avid, those guys are probably not WMA guys. Those guys are going after very specific birds. You talk to some of these hardcore turkey hunters, they have their birds picked out, and they know which hillside they're going to, and typically they're not going to go to the WMA and try to work with the general public. I think our WMAs do a really nice job of providing opportunity for somebody like myself that doesn't have access to land base. And so those things are useful, but the numbers don't concern me, mainly because they're, like I said, they're in relation to what is available.
Well, I understand the advantage of knowing, being able to hunt on private land. I just, based upon some of my constituents up in East Tennessee, I just want to make sure they're afforded the same opportunities as well, because they pay for a license just like
Oh,
you
yeah.
and me do.
When it's funny, in the same survey we did a mail survey that was talking about those hunter hours, and it's amazing how much more difficult it is to harvest a turkey in Region 4. And so, but when I talk to those guys, when you talk to the hunters, when I was talking, to the NWTF clubs about that, they take pride in that, and so I'd be at the annual meeting, and I'd be, it was something like, I can't remember the exact numbers, but to harvest a gobbler, it was 10 days or something like that, versus Middle Tennessee to harvest a gobbler is less than a day.
Usually takes me 45.
Yes. And so, but they take great pride in that. It was funny to be at the state board meeting where you have representation from the entire state, and the Region 2 guys are kind of laughing, oh yeah, we kill so many more, but then the Region 4 guys are like, I challenge you to come over and hunt the Cherokee and see how well you do hunting the Cherokee. So I, from that perspective, I think those guys in the Cherokee with those big blocks, they love hunting that land. They're extraordinarily tenacious, but extraordinarily, I wouldn't say unsuccessful, but they have to work a lot harder on those areas to get those
Well,
birds.
I appreciate, Mr. Anderson, I appreciate you entertaining my questions. I just think, as a whole, and as we look through all hunters in all areas of species, that we as an agency or as a commission need to be conscious of I call it the drap ear and weenie crowd, the blue collar people that are out there too, and wanting that opportunity as well. So,
Right.
thank
Well,
you
that's
for-
why I appreciate that, but that's why I stressed that so many of our hunters are unsuccessful, but they're out there. They're still
Oh, yeah.
hunting they're still hunting 4 hours a hunt. They're still hunting 7 days a season, but they're unsuccessful. But they're still a very important portion of our constituency.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you. And as a member of the Unsuccessful Hunter Caucus, I would just have one question. And can I get your PowerPoint?
Sure.
Would you mind to email it to me?
Absolutely.
It's very helpful information. I'd love to share that with some folks back home.
I can do it.
Obviously, I hunt East Tennessee, and it's straight up and down, and that's part of the problem. It's not that people don't have the opportunity. I have tons of turkeys, but they're smarter than I am because you have to get above them generally before they start hitting the ground. They're going to go up, and so you have to put a lot of effort, and that's part of the problem, just the terrain itself. But one thing, and it may be a question for John, I know with in my particular area, Holston Fence, we used to hunt turkeys, and there's thousands of turkeys in that Holston Fence area. Have we ever thought about, or is it just not cost effective, or is our population so good now that we don't want to fool with it, of going there and trapping those and moving them to the Cherokee? Because they're not hunted anymore. I don't think they hunt it at all. No, I think that it just depends on whoever's the head of the
Yeah.
colonel that's head of it. Is that just not cost effective anymore to do that, or?
Well, largely, and if John, if you want to answer anything specific to the area, dealing with relocation as a whole, essentially NWTF, who was obviously a major partner and player in the whole restoration effort across the country, they, as well as virtually every other state agency, have kind of put a halt on relocation at this point. And so mainly it's most areas are saturated, and then the areas, even the Cherokee, there's fewer birds, but there's lesser high-quality habitat,
Right.
and those kinds of things. Holston, moving those birds out of an area into a harvested area, that's a whole nother question, which would fall back on the regional desires. But it's also kind of against where turkey thought is going right now. Like, we were having a big discussion. NWTF right now they're having a new initiative, which is save the habitat, save the hunt, you know, which is going a two-pronged approach at going not only after a habitat initiative. They understand restoration is over. Now we need to go in there and work on the habitats, and then also working on hunter recruitment and retention. So I think the one thing that we can best do is work on those two issues. And then, you know, there's always, can we move turkeys? We get it in, you know, Lake County and the Mississippi River counties when they flood, and it's just a troubling, you know, moving those birds.
What time of the year is it best to move them that the turkeys are more likely to survive the move? Is it in the winter or something?
Well, it's really more about how easy it is to catch them than it is. The survival is not a big deal, because a turkey they oddly survive. You can keep them in those boxes for several days, and they do just fine. So survival has never been an issue for the most part, as long as you keep low, they're not too terribly hot. You know, you wouldn't want to move them dead of summer. But they're grouped up in the winter, so it makes them easier to harvest, or to shoot the rocket nets over.
Mr. Anderson, I have one last question.
Sure.
Do you have like a template as far as how the agency is going to handle nuisance turkeys in urbanized areas as far as relocation? Because we had some incidents there in East Tennessee where
Yeah.
there was a unfortunate incidents where some turkeys met their maker pretty early. And
Correct.
I guess, is there a process now that we think, maybe John can answer that question, as far as I know that people want to see maybe a different approach, or,
Right.
and I'm sure we're going to continue to face this as you have the urban sprawl as our state continues to grow, as far as how to address that issue, as far as relocating a nuisance bird. And
Right.
obviously, people are encouraged not to feed the animals, but, you know, with bird feed out and just simple household items. So, John, if you want to elaborate on that.
Well,
I want blood on my hands now.
there won't be another incident like that. And nuisance birds, you know, we kind of treat them just like deer and bear, as far as we evaluate what we think is bringing those birds into those residential or business areas, and try to get that removed if we can, and then usually the birds will leave if people aren't feeding them. But, you know, if we get to a situation like we had before, we would relocate those birds.
Just as long as the agency's aware of, that's going to be a continued call, and then we have
And, you know, the only thing
process.
that caveat to that is if, just like bears, or if they're so used to the public doing things, and we relocate them and they'll be right back in somebody's business wanting the same handouts, you know, those birds might not be candidates for being relocated.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
But they won't be handled the same way.
Yes, and we're working on a statewide plan for all of our turkeys, really all of our wildlife. We're working on an animal damage control plan that'll address turkeys statewide.
Well, I'd like to personally thank the agency for everything they've done over the years for turkeys. In Tennessee, I've been privileged to hunt in a lot of states, and I would say that we have probably the best turkey hunting in the United States at this point. And I know it's a destination for a lot of people with the amount of birds and liberal bag limits. And, you know, it's, in my opinion, the greatest bird to chase. So thank you and the agency for everything they've done to bring that bird back.
Thanks.
I'd like to recognize Ron Crabtree with Quail Forever. Is going to give us a short presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Teague. This will be a short presentation. There are a lot of good things going on with quail, and a lot of them are going on in Tennessee. One of the most recent things here that's happened is a result of a cooperative effort with Quail Forever, TWRA, NRCS, and Quail Forever chapters around the state. There are 2 wildlife biologist positions being advertised now for wildlife biologists down in West Tennessee, and some people have asked, why is it West Tennessee? Well, this is grant money, and that's where the grant money was, and that's where there's some farm bill money. So you put it where you can get the most benefit. In addition to being on the TWRA website, that's on the Quail Forever website. we've got a little 5-minute video here of one of the activities of one of those Quail Forever chapters that participated pretty good financially in the match money for this grant. That's the Mid-South Quail Forever chapter down at Memphis. And speaking, and it's a little video of their youth hunt they had down there. And speaking of that, we have a youth hunt coming up here in the Music City Quail Forever chapter that's in March down in Giles County here. That information is on the TWRA website as well as several other places. And with that, Chairman Teague, I think there's a little 5-minute video here, and you can see some of the reasons why some of us are so passionate about this, getting kids involved early in the outdoors. Thank you.
Everybody has to sign this before they can walk out into the field. There's a hold harmless and indemnity agreement in case somebody gets hurt.
Today, we are at Payne's Quail Preserve in Brunswick, Tennessee. We have got our members together to help teach young people about how to shoot live birds over a pointing dog.
We got eye protection, ear protection.
One of the guys on the Quail Forever group here, Johnny McFarland's not here today, he sits on our grant committee up in Nashville. Johnny, with 23 other people, vote on how the money that we raise in the state of Tennessee is spent. And we've been funding this one, except for the food, 100% the last 2 or 3 years.
The Friends of the NRA have provided us with a grant. We filed an application with them and got a grant for this event. So that without their support, we wouldn't be able to have this event.
Before I forget it, I'm assuming everybody either has a 12 gauge or a 20 gauge.
So
right?
far, that's what it was so far.
Okay, perfect.
Before we started, we did a safety lecture from Gene Smith, who's with the TWRA. Then we had the kids go over and are all shooting sporting clay. That way we can gauge those kids that are very good shots and those that need a little help. So we've tried to pair them up with the right kids so they can have a good time. Our focus obviously is on safety, protecting each other and our dogs.
We got to remember that. Same thing in the field. Of course, when it don't go off, it's more safer than it does go off.
I got to count again. Only 11 kids actually showed up, so I got to make sure everybody's safe. There's one. You can have this whole front. The whole front up here?
Yeah. Shells are courtesy of the NRA. Come on, guys. The idea is to start by 9:30 and finish by 12:30. That's 3 hours. We'll come back. We'll have hot dogs and hamburgers, and we'll show you how to clean a bird. Guys, we just don't shoot birds. We shoot them. We eat them. What this is a millet that he plants along with the grain sorghum. And he does a mix there of Egyptian millet and grain sorghum. And that's good not just for quail, but for turkeys, any kind of bird. Deer don't like it so much. They'll eat it only when it's real, real cold, none of anything else to eat. Point!
The idea is that if for every 10 kids, we get 2 or 3 that in later life enjoyed it and want to have a bird dog of their own and get involved in conservation, that they are our future. We're faced today with a dying sport in the Mid-South, except for the shooting preserves. And by getting these kids involved, the more apt to understand and be involved in conservation, and that's what we're about. a good shot. On behalf of Mid-South Chapter of Pheasant Forever and Quail Forever, we wanted to present this plaque to you as part of our thanks for you having us all out here. Thank you very much.
Very well.
One other thing, we have, from last year's hunt, we have the picture of the presentation here with Russ Cherry and Mr. Payne. There's a copy for you, Jerry. And Russ, there's a copy for you.
Yeah, I was skinny then.
Yeah.
I got a question. Ron, or whoever's, I don't see our quail person. Is there any evidence that with all the effort and money that you guys and the TWRA and Georgia and Mississippi and all of us are spending, that we're doing any good?
Yes.
Where?
There are, well, for example, Kentucky, as a fundraiser up there, they have a lottery on wild quail hunts. And there are a lot of places around where they're having some success. It's varying success. There's some tall timbers research down in Florida. Dale Rollins, his group out in Texas. There is hope, and I think that's one of the challenges that we've had. When people lose hope, you know, you don't have anything left. But to answer your question, yes, there are some successes, and there's some good things going to happen in Tennessee too. One of the things that we have on the agenda after these two biologists are put in down there is that we want to get a Quail Forever representative, regional representative dedicated to Tennessee. And TWRA has some things on the table that I think are going to be good. But yes, there is hope and there are some successes. There's just not enough of them, and there's not enough of them in Tennessee.
Darrell, do we still do whistle surveys and those kinds of, keep that kind of data?
Yeah, there is some minimal CP33 monitoring that takes place. And CP33 is a farm bill program that is to benefit quail, and there's still some monitoring that goes on. But I want to just clarify. I agree with Ron. There is some success, but it's very minimal. There's no states that have solved this quail problem. The success that is seen is on such a small scale. In fact, Dr. Anderson and I were at an NBCI meeting yesterday in Knoxville to talk about this very issue, and that they are trying to promote the fact that quail can recover, but they're talking small scale, a couple thousand acres here and there. There's nobody that's really doing landscape recovery of quail. It's focus area, and our agency is planning on doing focus areas, selecting 1 or 2 or 3 areas in the state. And that's literally going to be where the quail efforts are. Unless you had landscape change, it could be a whole lot of money spent with no benefit to quail, and so you really have to focus your efforts. But to reiterate what Ron says, yes, it can be done, but it's a small scale recovery that occurs.
Is it all about habitat, or is it predation, or disease, or what? I mean, we were
Just
told
so
for a
you
long
know,
time it was
two years ago, wild hogs was the bane of our division, and now it has become quail. Literally for the last 6 or 8 months, quail has literally been our #1 issue that we're dealing with in the wildlife division. And that question right there is literally what we went and asked NBCI to sit down with. NBCI is the National Bob White Conservation Initiative, and they're all the leading quail biologists gather. And that was our concern, is we wanted to approach them and speak to them regarding this quail issue. Habitat is the #1 factor, hands down. You have to have the habitat before you could have any quail. However, the point that we're trying to make is if you don't have the habitat, and in their plan they call for large-scale habitat, whether it's 800 to 3,200 acres of pure early successional good quail habitat. What we've asked them to address is, if you don't have that, if you have a 50-acre farm or a 100-acre farm that's far below that, are there other factors that come into play? Predation, hunting, disease, pen-reared birds. There's so many other things that could come into play that could affect quail populations, and we don't know the answer. We're seeking their help to try to figure that out. So if you don't have the habitat, what else can we do, if there is anything we can do? Obviously, habitat is the key, but there's definitely other things that come into play that could negatively or positively impact quail.
Anybody else have anything to bring up before the Wildlife Management Committee? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Teague. We're going to take a short break for just momentarily for the video people to